I Want to Jump Like Dee Dee, with me, Giles Sibbald, is the music podcast that does music a bit differently. I'm talking to some incredible musicians, DJs and producers about how they use an experimental mindset to fuel their own creativity, pursue new challenges, overcome fears, bounce back from mistakes. One of the wonderful things about an experimental mindset is that it gives you this willingness and desire to be, not just open to other ways of living and approaching your life, whether that be, through your work, your hobbies, your relationships, but to, kind of actively going to find those other ways. And in terms of music, I mean, this could be, bringing in different musical styles, influences, different instrumentation and collaborations, perhaps with people that you might not ordinarily gravitate towards, basically getting out of your comfort zone. It could also be finding different ways to feed your creativity. And my guest today is a hugely talented multi-instrumentalist and songwriter who's played drums, keyboards, and is the guitar for which he is most well known, drawing on inspiration from people like Hendrix, Santana, Stevie Ray Vaughan, D'Angelo, and Jimmy Page. He's someone who, to my way of thinking, ticks many of these mindset boxes, and musically someone who crosses and fuses the traditional, let's call them genres, to sort of create an exciting and diverse catalogue of both sort of solo, soundtrack, and collaborative music. So let's shut up now and then let's find out more. So it's an extreme honor to welcome Marcus Machado to the show today. Marcus, brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh man, thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. So you're in the studio. We were just talking before. You're in the studio there.
Yeah. I'm actually in the studio right now in Brooklyn, New York, finishing up to the last bits of my new album that I'm going to be putting out very soon. So yeah, it's a whole project that I've been working on actually since from like 2017, and I'm putting together like a documentary. It was actually. This is almost like a soundtrack album to a short film, because it started off as I got a call to do music for a short film, and I just got so fascinated with the project. I was like, man, I had all these songs, and I just kept recording, and then I was like, man, I should turn this into like a soundtrack album. So it's almost kind of like it's a vibe of like Curtis Mayfield, Superfly. It's different from my previous project, but it's more so on the production side, still guitar oriented, but you have strings on there, live strings, and it's a cool vibe. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How did those? I mean, that's sort of quite a long period to be kind of like sort of coming up, kind of, I guess, kind of creating the the concept of it. I mean, how does it feel looking back at how it how it started and how it's kind of evolved to where it is now?
Oh man, it's totally amazing to look back and see how much stuff has happened, because actually this project started before the pandemic. So I'm actually right now like finishing up a documentary that I'm actually going to put around the whole project. So I had documented stuff from 2017 and then until now. So it's actually like we was in a different space, different time, and stuff like that. And now to come back and say like, man, look at all these the stuff that we've done and to put it out. And I feel like for me, everything is about time. You know what I mean? I don't really force it, because actually this project, believe it or not, was supposed to be my debut album first before Aquarius Purple. So in Aquarius Purple, I started on that project during the pandemic. But the thing was, between touring and doing other projects, it was kind of like I didn't really have the time to really just sit down and just finish. It was like I would start on something, then I have to put it down and go on tour. And with this project, like basically the pandemic was kind of a blessing in disguise, because it made me sit down and really like finish what you have and really get out there and get everything that you need to get done and to put it out. So I really used the pandemic, even though I can't believe it's already 3 years that, time has went by fast. And, just basically, just using that time to really finish, and, everything has just been super fast. But, I'm loving the process, and, I wouldn't change anything. That's what it's all about.
Is there? I mean, I don't know how much you can say about it, but the documentary, is that
Is that kind of like about your own sort of personal journey through this?
No, but the documentary is basically about the making of the album. So
Yeah.
basically of the new album, and it's pretty much the journey of the process of how it started, how it came
Mm,
about, and you know starting in 2017 and pandemic and all that stuff, and then up
mm.
until now where we're at. So yeah, it's a whole. I'm giving you an inside
The
look at
inside track on
at
this, yeah.
everything. Yeah, 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 man. So yeah, and also too, this is the first time that I ever did any type of documentation or anything on myself. So
Mm,
it's very interesting, and I was like, man, since it's a short movie and everything's attached to it, I really wanted to make this project special,
mm.
completely different from my previous project because remember the music itself is for a movie, for a short film. So actually you're
Yeah,
listening to like a soundtrack. So then, once this was all pandemic and different ideas coming at the same time, and I was like, man, I have the album is done. I was like, I really want to add more value to it. And I was like, the documentation of having like the making of it, really people getting behind the scenes of, how it
mm,
came about, which I always love documentaries and stuff, music
yeah,
documentaries, and
yeah.
always seeing the process and how it came about. So I was like, maybe this is the right time to do it. So yeah.
I mean, is it, I'm guessing that you kind of like learned quite a bit about like yourself through this, and also kind of putting a documentary together alongside a soundtrack, and the way that a sort
Right.
of soundtrack looks with that must have
Mhm.
been. I mean that sounds like a really kind of like fascinating project to get
Yeah,
into as well.
no, it definitely is because this project was the first time of me doing any movie score at all. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? So this really spearheaded the process of like me, doing movie scores now with like people like Robert Glasper and Nick Britell and all these different other people. But this was actually the first project that started, me getting into that lane
yeah,
too. So it's so different,
yeah,
it's different as an artist is one thing, touring and performing, but really being in the studio and seeing all these different scenes and trying to paint the picture of the scene, you know what I mean, of the
mm,
music. So this is really something. It's special. It's special. I'm very excited about it. Yeah, because I've been holding on to it for a while too. So
and
yeah.
I, and I mean, just for my kind of uneducated brain with this. I mean, putting together a soundtrack, kind of
Mhm.
music for as a soundtrack as opposed to an album. I mean, what? How did you find that? Did you find that easy, or a different process that you have to take with it?
I mean, for me, it was just everything kind of happened organically. Like I
Mm,
wasn't even planning on. It was just like, let me just do music for this, for this short film, and
yeah,
that's how it started. I wasn't thinking about no soundtrack or
yeah,
document, But then when I had all these songs, it was just like creatively a lot of stuff was just coming out. And I was just like, man, I was like, all these songs kind of line up. It's like
it's
almost putting
amazing.
a puzzle together. And then I was
Yeah,
like, man, I was like, this can't be just music for the short film. Like I should make a continuation of this project. And then that's
mm,
where the idea of the soundtrack, albums. Because
yeah,
really, like now these days, you don't have that no more. You really don't have no more of like movies, and then the soundtrack was like, man, I love this movie, but the soundtrack really was really cool to go with it. Like they used to have that in
yeah,
the '90s, and I was like, man, we should bring that back, but
yeah,
just doing it my own way. You know what I mean? And like I said, for me, it's just really when you think about it, no limits. It's like even if you may not have an idea of what it is wholly that you want to do, but at least dig in, search, do your research, and do your
mm,
best and see what happens. And what else can happen? Nothing. Unless people say, "Hey, this is awful," then you'd be like, "Okay, I go back to the drawing board." But for me, it's like,
yeah,
why not? You know what I mean? We have all the tools to do whatever it is that we need to do.
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's funny that I remember there are some songs, aren't there? I'm sure you got your own that are just
Mhm.
you can picture them um with a particular film,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I always think the one I always come back to is it just like could have come straight away is "Gimme Shelter."
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course.
I
Of
mean,
course.
it's just, I mean,
Stones.
it's
Stones.
like
Yeah.
one of
Yeah.
the best songs ever written, and I just kind of come to that, and I just think, yeah, that
Yeah.
reminds me of like I think it was in, I think there was this, I think it was in Casino. I'm sure
Yep.
it's been in
Hmm.
tons of,
Yep.
and it's
Yep. For sure.
just so evocative of a particular
Absolutely.
scene and
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
special.
And all those, yeah, like that, for example, was another inspiration. Like just going back and just hearing songs, and you know where that song was at, and like where it put you. You know what I mean? And for me, I was like,
Yeah.
man, this is my first time, doing a project with live strings. You know what I mean, in the
Mm,
studio, and like really like producing. Besides like guitar playing and all that, and really production. And a lot of these songs were recorded in the studio with the band and that
mm,
process. Whereas my debut album, Aquarius Purple, a lot of that stuff was recorded in different places. Like majority of the album was recorded in Amsterdam like 8 years
mm.
ago, and then I kind of finished it up, back here in New York. So, and a lot of stuff I recorded myself. So there is two different projects that I'm really, for me, it's just like growing. You know what I mean? Growing as an artist. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I don't like to repeat the same thing. You know what I mean? One project is one thing, we're on to the next. You know what I mean? And that's my thing too. As a music lover of different artists, you want to grow with whoever it is that you like. You know what I mean? I don't want to
Yeah.
hear the same song. Whereas sometimes some people be like, man, I wish he can make another song like this and that. But sometimes it's like you gotta. It's like the days of the
Mm.
week. Monday is not your Friday. You know what I mean? Friday may be something different than your Saturday. You know what I mean? It's just
I
it's a feel.
totally,
You know what I mean?
totally hear you with that. Totally hear you.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? The you know, I kind of see some, a lot of bands that want to want to move on, want to do different things.
Yep.
Perhaps kind of like experiment with whatever different sounds or kind of
Right.
different
Right. Right.
fusions of things. And sometimes
Absolutely.
there's there are some music fans, and I get this because I've done this myself, where it's just like,
Hmm.
damn, I wish they would just do this. I always
Yeah.
think that there are only some bands that can do that, but just for your own kind of creativity, your own
Yeah.
sanity, I think
Hmm.
you have to move, you have to
You
shift.
have to, yeah, you have to move on, because if you're just stuck in one place, like it's like life. Like your life is not the same. Like you have your
Mm,
ups, you have your downs, but it actually makes you at the end of the day of who you are. And I think some people in music, we're kind of like thinking ahead, and sometimes like albums that you might have heard it, 10 years ago, and you was like, oh man, why did they do that? But now 10 years later, you go back and you listen to it and you understand, like, oh, now I understand why they were
yeah.
going. It kind of grows on you at different times. Like for me, I won't go so far out to where people was just like, okay, he's doing something else. But I like to have different stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like playing the same guitar every day. If you keep the strings on the guitar after a month, it's going to go dull. You have
It's
to.
gonna go totally.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So yeah.
Going back to when you were a kid, I know you were, you started playing it from a sort of very young age. What I
Yeah.
mean, those kind of, I always believe that at a really early age, those sort of formative influences, where
Hmm.
musically or whatever, kind of in your life,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
kind
I
of
mean, for
shape who
me,
we are
yeah,
as we grow up.
definitely, definitely for me, because I mean, my parents, they had a great taste in music. So,
Yeah.
in my family, we were introduced from everything. Like, and even as a adult now, you can love a certain genre or a certain artist, but you
Mm,
have to have an open mind to different music. You know what I mean? It's like when you travel, and it's like, for example, every time I would come to London and I would hear like these, the dub stuff, the reggae. You would hear,
mm,
some psychedelic stuff, and you'd be like, man, I never heard that in here in the States. And then
mm,
you go to the record store, and it's like, what's this artist? That fascinates me, and that makes me inspired to do something else. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
and as a kid, in our house, it was from Jimmy to Coltrane to Miles to John Denver to
Mm,
Journey to you know what I mean, to Earth, Wind and Fire, to Weather Report. It was all different genres of music. So when it got time for me to do my own music, I was like, man, I just don't want to be just a rock guitar player or just a blues guitar player or just a jazz guitar player. Like I love all of these equally, but I need to figure out how can I combine all of my influences and make it into this one thing. So it's
Yeah,
like, I'm also too grown up in the time of hip hop. I'm a hip hop kid also too. So I was like, how
yeah,
can I how can I take all of these? It's like a gumbo. It's like how can I take all of these different flavors and put it in one and make it
mm,
your own thing? And not to my thing too, also too coming up was not to imitate. You know what I mean? It's like you could
yeah,
be the biggest, Led Zeppelin fan or Jeff Beck, but there's only one Jimi Hendrix. There's one
yeah,
Stevie Ray Vaughan. The only thing we can do is take, what we love from them and make it into your own. You know what I mean? That's pretty much my whole thing on music and like growing up and listening to all these different genres of music. It's just like, man, because like any other kid, coming up, you would sit and solo and learn the same exact lick that Eddie Van Halen played and beat
yeah,
it. And it's cool. He's like, oh man, like you felt good. It's like, man, I know this part. I know the Purple Haze part. You know what I mean? But after a while, you want to develop your own style. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And not become a trick pony of, yeah, well, he just does Hendrix or he's a Hendrix. That's all he does. Like I never wanted to be stuck in one box because
yeah,
it's like when you go to a music store and they're like you have your jazz section and if it's something a little different then we're gonna put him in alternative because we don't know what to call it. It's like I hate being in a box. It's like music is music.
yeah,
Let the people decide whatever mood it puts you in. Then that's what it's gonna put you in. You know what I mean? Not label and try to
yeah,
which I feel like today's music, a lot of that is happening, and I feel like it's almost like a fast food. People are
mm,
just getting the same thing, and it's not becoming of stuff that's feeding for the soul. You know what I mean? And if it is, it's very like underground. You know what I mean? If you know, you
mm,
know. And and for me, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I put out 2 albums or if I put out 30 albums. Whatever, if I know that I did my best and I put my heart into it, people will always seek out good music. And maybe it'll take 20 years, maybe never, but I know that once it's out in the universe, that's I did my part. Mhm.
it's kind of like I totally hear you with that. I think that,
Mhm.
the kind of like the genre thing is I mean, I understand why it happens, and I mean, there's kind of like record stores need a way to kind of, sort of
Yeah,
put where to
yeah,
put them in the crates and things like that. But
yeah.
it kind of like I think there's a risk that when you rely on genres too much, you become lazy, and you don't
Absolutely.
you kind of stop thinking. As I mean, as a kind of consumer, you kind of stop
Yep.
thinking like, oh, I'll go to the soul section, I'll just go to the hip hop section, and then you kind of like
Yeah.
miss those exciting kind of
Yep.
fusions.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I don't know where to put that. Where does that go?
Absolutely. And that's kind of like the times that we're in now. If you pay $10 for Apple Music, you can get unlimited artists. If you type in
Mm,
anybody's name, it's at your fingertip.
yeah,
Whereas the music stores, record stores, you would go in and it would be like a whole day. Like you would go dig in the crates or CDs and it'll be like, okay, who's this artist? And you're reading the credits. You're going through the whole song, the whole
yeah,
album to figure out, do I like it? Is it cool? Now it's kind of like, we won't even get through a whole album. We'll just skim through it. Okay, I
mm,
like this song, download it, is mine. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. But the only thing that I feel that's still organic is live concerts where people can come
mm,
to a show and they really get that experience with the fans and that's where it's at. But I feel
mm,
like we're moving forward. I don't feel like it's going backwards. We are moving
mm,
forward, but it's just a matter of people being more I don't know. I just feel like people just need to be a little bit more appreciative of what we have because we have so much different access to everything. I just feel like
yeah,
now people are kind of getting lazy of like, I don't want to hear this when, you know, that's where, like, in the pandemic, when everything was shut down, like, a quick story, like, when I put out my debut album, put it out in 2021, and I was like, man, I don't know if this is like the right time, because that was like a 7 to 8 year process of getting the actual whole album together. And then now
Mm.
I'm coming at a time where everything is shut down. There's no shows, there's no, can't really play and do nothing. And I'm like,
Mm.
now I want to put out an album. This is probably not going to go well. And then to my surprise, it did a 360 effect, because actually people were in the house and they couldn't do nothing. So that was the time that people got
Yeah.
back into why they love music and why they love live entertainment and why they love buying records. And people actually sat with the record. And then to my surprise, I put it out on vinyl and everything sold out. And it was just like people were really like,
Yeah.
really listening to music, versus as if I put it out in 2019 or 2018, it'll be new today, and then next week it'll be old news. Because there's so much
Yeah.
music that's being put out every single day. Like, there's millions of different artists. Doesn't matter from known artists to unknown artists, that you can right now, we can sample this conversation and put it out today.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
somebody out there will listen to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's where
Totally.
it's, so it's
I guess.
you know, go ahead,
I
go
guess.
ahead.
I guess people learned to kind of about their own patience, being because they had time on their hands. It's okay,
Right.
well, I can be more patient. I don't have to listen to kind of 15 seconds and then move on to the next track. I can actually
Mhm.
just kind of like get this record and sit with it and
Mhm.
listen to it,
Because
which I think is
yeah.
in this kind of in the streaming culture is a little bit, we start to lose that, because we get used to everything being immediate and having to lives move so quickly that we lose I think the patience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And actually, like, sit at home and listen to a whole record. Like, that's how the way I always grew up on, and I always loved that. I
Yeah.
always loved going to the record stores and just
Mm.
walking around and just seeing what's the newest thing. And that's, as a creative and as a musician, that was inspiring me to come up with other stuff. It doesn't matter.
Mm.
I think for me, what inspires me also too, a lot of people should know, is traveling. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
when you go
Yeah.
to, especially, when I was in Europe, and to see that always fascinated me, to where, the UK is its own country, or their own place, their own vibe. Then you would go to Paris, it's completely different. You go to
Mm.
Spain, completely different. You go to Portugal, complete, and how everything is close to each other, but everybody is completely different. You know what I
Very
mean? And
different.
that's for me,
Yeah.
the culture, the music, the people, and that's where that always, traveling. I always tell people, like, because they always feel like, oh man, I gotta have all this money to. I'm like, no. Only thing you need to do is just get yourself a passport and just go to these different places. And especially as an artist, that for me, that's the most inspiring part, to be able to, even when I'm touring too as well, is to go to these different places and really absorb what's happening,
Mm.
what's happening in the now, in that particular time. Mhm.
That's a really interesting point there, because that's one thing I was going to ask you, was about as you were growing up, and also through your life, the importance
Yeah.
of your environment, your kind of physical environment, either
Mhm.
just sort of what's happening in the places that you are, and if you're from where you're born to where you live now, to and also the
Mhm.
traveling that you do, like, but
Mhm.
you're talking about kind of absorbing that kind of culture and influence, and
Yeah.
giving it time to, okay, this is worth having a look at.
Yeah, because I mean, there's people that I know that, as big as New York is, there's people that I know that's never even been to Central Park, and
Yeah.
it's in the same in every people are. I think it's like a comfort zone too, because people are so
Mm.
comfortable where they're at, and I'm just like, no, there's more to the world than just the one little place that you live on, your block
Mm.
or whatever. I just feel like, you can learn so much. You know what I mean? Of course you have books and you have, TV and all these different things. But for me, the greatest asset is traveling, because I've never seen nothing like it. You know what I mean? To where, it's crazy how I could be one place today, and in the same day I could be in a whole
Yeah.
nother place. different vibe, different culture, different people. And I think for me, as a creative, that's the best. That's the best thing that that we have. You know what I mean? That we can
Mm,
actually do. You know what I mean? And vice versa. Because they always say the grass is greener on the other side. We love what's happening over there. Vice versa. You all love over on this side. But it's just the fact
yeah.
that you're able to go and see and really experience what's happening in a different place. I think that's the one of the best things.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because there's a band, you may have heard them, may not have. They're from Manchester,
Mhm.
called a Certain Ratio, and they started out round about probably like 1979, 1980,
Okay.
and
Mhm.
they started off on the Factory Records with
Right, right.
with Joy Division. And they were kind of sort of, to start with, they were playing a kind of sort of post-punky. There was a bit of a
Mhm.
kind of dance thing. They brought in a drummer, because they started off without a drummer. They were just
Mhm.
using kind of like electronics, and then they brought in a drummer, and he started to bring in some kind of sort of funk and soul rhythms into the band. But it
Right.
was one day when they actually came to New York on the first time that they went to New York, and they were just absorbing like kind of all these sort of kind of Cuban, Puerto Rican
Mhm. Mhm.
influences from
Mhm.
the music that they were kind of like hearing either in clubs or out on the streets, and that
Right.
has followed right to today, and they're writing some of the best music that they've done.
Right.
So
See, this
you're
is what
right.
I'm saying. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
that's the same thing because like my family is Panamanian from Panama and Costa Rica, so that
Mm,
influence too. You know what I mean? The Latin side and all that too.
yeah,
It's just being for me. I always tell people you gotta have an open mind to stuff. You
yeah,
can't just be it's just like you just can't just be one narrow track mind. And I feel like a lot of people
absolutely.
are like that. And it's like we have all these different look around you. Like we have all these different options and things to do, and it's almost like spoiled. It's like because I know
Mm,
I've been to certain places where they don't have what we have here, and they're totally fine. It's like I have my family, I have my house,
mm,
I have one car, and when I go on vacation for with the family, and that's it. I'm cool as long as I'm
mm.
not stuck on I need to have 3 cars and this and that. You know what I mean? And for me, that's where I'm kind of like, yeah, we got to really be appreciative of what we have. And I feel like the pandemic, that was another lesson too. It's like, when everything is shut down and you couldn't even go outside to go to the grocery store or the simple
Mm,
things, and then people start realizing like, wow, I really appreciate just walking down the street without looking at somebody.
yeah,
Like, oh,
it's,
stay away from me. You you don't have a mask. It was
yeah.
just weird. It was just a little bit like, we just got to do better. And I hopefully, coming out of this stuff, things can
Mm.
get better. I hope so. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
mm,
yeah.
mm,
Yeah. That's it's an interesting thing. What kind of legacy it'll leave in people's minds.
yeah,
In a way, I kind of feel like people are almost like forgetting it as well. But it's hard to know what actually stays under the surface.
yeah,
You might
yeah,
not see it in the day to day, but it is kind of
yeah.
there. I don't know. I guess we'll sort of kind of see
Yeah,
with
yeah, we'll see
time.
what happens because like I said, I mean, especially for us, I was fortunate and blessed enough that I was still able to stay busy through the
Mm,
pandemic. But a lot of artists like touring, and I feel like as a creative, our business model, we had to add more hats onto what we were doing. And I feel like it just pushed everybody as a creative more to instead
mm,
of just depending on, okay, well, we have shows and tours. Like you had to figure out something else besides your main, you
yeah,
know, thing
yeah.
to stay busy, You know what I mean? So, we'll
Totally.
we see we'll see what happens.
You talked a little a few minutes ago about comfort zones and sort of pushing
Mhm.
yourself out of comfort zones. I mean, has
Yeah.
that been something that's always come easy to you, or have you had to kind of do you have to consciously push yourself, or is it
It's
just a natural kind of thing
no,
for you?
no, no. I think for me, it comes natural. For me,
Mm,
it's like one place bores me too long, so I like to keep
mm,
moving. You know what I mean?
mm,
I wouldn't say that like oh, I'm never satisfied with anything, but I feel like if with comfort, like it comes natural to me. I don't, and it's like the same thing with music. It's like, if you go in the studio, let the music come to you. I never was like a person like, okay, today we're gonna go to the studio and we're gonna make a song. It's not really like that. It's like, let's get in the studio, let's vibe out, and let's just
Yeah,
jam and just see where it goes. Versus having this, it's always good to be on point and have an idea basis of what you want to do, of
yeah,
course, completely. But I feel like some of the best stuff comes out naturally when you just kind of don't think about it that much, because it feels like a lot of times if you get in your head and you're like, okay, I
mm,
got to do this or I got to do that, sometimes you get the opposite where it's hard to get stuff
totally.
out because now you're so like concentrated on it. I have to finish the song or I have to get this recorded. Whereas it's like, hey, let's come in the studio, let's see what happens. Maybe I just do one guitar line today. Maybe I do a whole song. Maybe, but
Mm,
just let it naturally come to you. You know what I mean? So I kind of, even as a younger age, I kind of just always kept that notion, just
mm.
fill it out. You know what I mean? Don't really push yourself. You know what you want to do, you have a goal, but kind of just fill it out and let it come naturally to you. And I think some of the best results will come when you just kind of just flow with it. Yeah. Don't get in your head too much. Yeah.
This is where I think people can learn a lot from you,
Mhm.
and that kind of mindset, because
Mhm.
we get, I guess, in general, a lot of people who, a lot of us who, are either, kind of working in paid jobs or whatever.
Right.
A lot of society is around, kind of goals, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
like setting yourself targets, like what are you going to do today? It's like kind of productivity, and productivity is measured by certain targets and things like that. And it
Right.
it
Right.
it
Right.
kind of like, I think that, I mean, so okay, sometimes those are good to have, those kind of maybe kind of big things in mind, like you said. But
Mhm.
but if you become obsessed with those, it can be hugely disappointing when you don't meet them, and it's like, okay.
Exactly. It's like an example. It's like having a girlfriend and you're like, oh man, I want this girl, I want to marry her, I have to get married by the age of 30 or 32.
Yeah, yeah.
And if my time limit, if I don't get, and then you're asking for that girl or being
Mm,
married, right? And then suddenly you get the opposite. You don't get the girl that you want. You get somebody that you marry so fast. Now you're divorced. Now you have 5 kids, and it's taking all your money. And it's just like when you should have just kind of just when it comes, let it come. Long you're doing what you're supposed to be doing,
yeah,
then everything should just kind of work out. And it's the same thing on a 9 to 5 job. You can hate your 9 to 5 job every day, but at some point you got to go in there as a mindset that you know, yes, this is something that I have to do to survive and make money, but at the end of the day, I gotta deal with these people. You don't have to be friends with them, but
mm,
you have to get through the day. So you have to prep yourself and say, you know what? I'm not saying be happy go lucky, I'm doing this job, but I'm just like, you gotta kind of put yourself in a mindset of like, you know, let me just go do what I need to do. And then before you know it, you'll look at the time and you'll be like, hey, it's 5 o'clock. I already
yeah,
time
yeah,
time went by so fast. Versus looking at your watch every hour. Okay, is it 5 o'clock yet? Is it 5 o'clock? Then the day goes by so slow. And then that's when your mind starts to like mess with you and then you start thinking other stuff. And then that's where I feel like a lot of things clash, where you just kind of like,
mm,
it's got to be something in that mind to where you can just be at ease, even though when there's chaos and there's a lot of stuff, you have to find somewhere. Like even for me, like if there's things where it's not just not happening for me, or there's an argument or something, instead of going into a place and just like going crazy, you have to find, music is therapeutic. Maybe go for a
mm,
walk, listen to some music. Maybe I'll go play. Maybe I'll just, I'll do something else. Maybe I'll just work out and just kind of just zone out, and
yeah,
it takes your mind somewhere else. Maybe you're by the water. You just kind of meditate and just be by the water so you can feel that breeze. So then
mm,
it takes these different thoughts of you think what you were thinking earlier and kind of puts you at ease. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
yeah. I don't have all the answers, but I know for
No.
me, speaking for me, those are kind of the things that kind of works for me. Mhm.
So sounds like, kind of intuition
Yeah.
and, kind of like instinct is sort of
Mhm.
quite, is quite important, quite important things for you, in how,
Yeah.
like, in how you work.
Yeah, for sure. Because like for me, I love the process, but I don't like rushing the process.
Yeah.
Even though there's a lot of songs or there's a lot of even like learning a song for a show or something like that, it's a process.
Mm,
But it's like, as a kid, I used to practice maybe like 5, 6 hours a day,
mm,
after school, but then, as time as you get older, you can't, I don't have 6 hours free time on my hands these days now. But
yeah,
at some
yeah,
point you have to put whatever you're doing to the side, and for that good hour or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, take it take it for you. I don't care what it is that you do. Take 20 minutes, 10 minutes, just to kind of do whatever it is that you want to do and get your
mm,
mind wherever it needs to be at. Because things just go so fast to where sometimes you get caught up in life and you get lost too at times where you're just going with the motions, and then that's how you kind of get yourself burnt out because
yeah,
you don't
yeah,
really take the time to, okay, just take a breather for a second. That's why a lot of times it's just go, 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 go. So at some point you have to figure out a time or something, whatever it is that you love to do, that helps you calm you down a little bit.
I like a good friend of mine is Dave Barbarossa. He's a
Mm.
drummer. Sort
Yeah.
of drummed in Adam and the Ants and Bow Wow Wow.
Mhm.
And he was teaching me the drums a few years ago.
Mhm.
And he said there was something he said which always stuck with me, and it was just he was like, Giles, remember to enjoy that it's about the process. It's not about the end, getting to the end. It's about the
Yeah, there you
process.
go.
Kind
Yeah.
of, if you start rushing things, it's like
Absolutely.
come back, slow down. It's the
Absolutely.
process.
Yeah. And that's my thing. Like, as long as, I've been playing guitar. I picked up the guitar at 2 years old, and I've been playing professionally since 9 years old. And, for
Yeah.
me, at a young age, yes, I will say that, I was very, I already knew what I wanted to do. Whereas,
Mm,
it takes time for everybody's different. Maybe it takes you in your 20s, younger age, whatever. But for me, I already had a idea of exactly what I wanted to do. And then for me, it was real simple. It was like, I'm gonna do this as long as I can. And most importantly, I don't care how big or how small, whatever, I always need to enjoy what I do. When it doesn't
mm,
become enjoyable, I ain't doing it. Then
yeah.
that just means, because that's the thing, it's always good in the beginning, but doesn't matter how big you become or whatever, a lot of times, a lot of famous artists, they would tell you they burnt out or they don't like what it is that they did. That's why if you notice every favorite artist that you love, you always love their first album because their first album was showing you they had hunger. They were like, oh, I have
Yes.
something to prove. I want to show you, so you hear that. You hear like is a genuine thing. By the third and fourth album, depending on how bigger they become, you start to see because now it's like you have all these different forces and different people around you. You might have made all so much money now to where it's not enjoyable. Now it's just kind of
Yeah.
like a machine. You're just going in the studio, okay, let me go knock this song out. And you don't have that same hunger. So for me, doesn't matter how old I get or whatever, how long I live, I always want to make sure that I, enjoy and always have that hunger from when I was a little kid up until now to always enjoy the music and what it is that you do. Yeah.
As you've kind of grown up,
Mm,
the kind of the scenes that you were hanging out in,
mm,
and the people that you sort of gravitated towards, from your kind of formative years through to kind of right through
mm.
your life. What sort of role have they played for you?
A whole lot. I mean, for me, at a younger age, I was always around older people, so I
Mm,
always were around older stuff. So being in clubs and seeing what's going on at 9 years old, going to
Mm.
jam sessions and really absorbing the actual grown up
Wow.
person actually playing, that was
Amazing.
a big thing. That was a big thing for me because then I had a chance to see, okay, what is it really, really like? And then, of course, you would go to school and then you have, the kids that's your age and too. But then
Yeah.
for me, I had the best of both worlds because I would go to school, I would chill, friends and all that stuff too, do like what kids do. But then this music thing that I really love to do, I'm was actually with grown up people, you know what I mean? And actually learning from the older people, So they're
Mm.
actually putting me onto game about what to do, how to do this, to do that. And I was fortunate enough with some people to like really learn that from of what to do. And, so
Yeah.
when I became older, I kind of kept that same vibe. So like when there's younger cats that's younger than me now,
Mm.
if they get around me, I'll always pull them and always tell them like, okay, do this or try to help them. And, I always want to keep that going because they always tell me there's a person in front of you, there's a person behind you. You're in the middle. Never get too comfortable or never get too big headed that I'm better than anybody else because there's somebody right behind you watching every move that you do and will probably
Yeah.
be better than you, and then there's a person that's in front of you that you're watching. You're like, hey, you're like, so it's like a revolving door. It never gets old. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
the thing
Yeah.
is find your place and where you want to be, and do it as best as you can, and pass it on to somebody else. Because I feel like for me, we're messengers. We're not. It's a gift that what we have, and it's
Yeah.
not about me. It's about putting it out to the universe. And if it makes somebody smile or it makes somebody feel good, then I know that I did my part. You know what I mean? And my
Yeah.
thing is
Yeah.
to pass it on to people behind me. You know what I mean? It's not about. That's where it gets tricky with people because then that's where ego and all that stuff comes in because then
Mm.
and they feel like they're in control. And it's my thing because now they've been put on this pedestal that everybody's saying you're great, you're great, you're great. And then now they start feeding, they start getting ego tripping to where that any gift can be taken away from you at any given time. So,
Yeah.
use that wisely, and, it's not about you at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's a really kind of great way to look at it, and really,
Yeah.
and one of the hardest things to do, I guess, is
Mm.
keep that, keep our own egos in check,
Sure.
and sort of it's like a kind of natural thing, is
Yeah.
about kind of
Yeah.
survival or sort of
Yeah,
protection.
yeah, yeah. And like I said, it's always good to have confidence. There's nothing wrong to be
Mm.
confident about anything that you do, but just know that, you're not the person. All the gifts and all the things that you can do, it's really it didn't come from you, it's instilled in you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
be mindful of that, you know what I mean? And use it wisely, use it the right way. You know what I mean?
It's
And I
kind of
just
like
feel like
it's like when I kind of start thinking about about people's egos generally, and how some people can become so self-absorbed, and you
mhm,
think that okay, well, it's about something in their upbringing, perhaps, and you can see how it ripples through generations.
mhm,
If
yep,
these things are not tackled at a kind of early age,
yeah.
it,
It's a
it's
continuation. Mhm.
perpetuating, isn't it?
Yep, it keeps going. So yeah.
Well, interesting. I mean, on that, your kind of attitude and sort of approach about the younger ones behind you,
Mhm,
the older ones ahead of you. In terms of, I'm just thinking of some of your amazing collaborations, I should say, like
mhm,
really incredible. With some amazing artists, and also sort of really breaking new ground musically.
mhm.
I mean, in terms of that, of kind of intergenerational collaborations, and how you learn from those sort of younger musicians and from some of the older musicians as well. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, let's talk about that for a bit, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always put myself always as a student. Doesn't matter, I've been playing guitar all my life, but I'm still learning. So when I
Mm.
get around people that are older, naturally you're gonna absorb. what they have. But then also too, when you're around younger people, you're gonna get the youthfulness and the fire and the whole thing. It's like, for example, like my sister is a producer, and she when we started out, she actually liked drums, so I taught her to play drums, and then she had picked up drums. And then when I went to Europe for like a couple months, I had before I left, I had the first Reason. It was on a Macintosh computer, the big computer. First Reason, and I was like, we don't have a drum kit. I was like, it's this new, thing called Reason. Why don't you make beats? She's like, no, it's too technical, and I don't get it, whatever. So I had all this equipment there. So I left. I was in Europe for a couple months, and so now when I come back and I visit, she's like, hey, I have a CD. Check it out. I want you to check this out. So I put in the CD, and I'm like 16 tracks, and I'm going through the stuff. Stuff is killing. And I'm just like, this is dope. Who's this? She's like, it's me. I did it. I was like, no.
Wow.
I was like, what are you talking about? The reason you told me that you didn't like, she said, yeah, when you went away, I just start messing with it, and then I start getting fascinated with it. And now she's like this big, producer and DJ, and of course we have a production team, Mark 7, where she produces, I produces on that side. But that's another prime example of being around younger people, and they're absorbing stuff that you had, and then they kind of make it through their own thing. And then now vice versa, I learned from her too, because there's stuff, her style, her vibe is not my vibe. You know what I mean? So now it's like, before I would have to show her, okay, you got to do it like this, and you got to do it like this. Now I don't need to show her anything. She's showing me stuff. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like there's no in between of an older cat because he's more wise, or a younger person because they may not have the knowledge of an older person. You can still learn from both. You know what I mean? So it's just in different ways, and that's for me pretty much all my life. That's how the way I looked at it for me is, I'm just a student. You know what I mean? And it's not to take in like, oh, okay, now I learned something. Now I'm going to copy off somebody. It's just kind of like be around them. It doesn't necessarily have to be about music. You can always draw inspiration from kids. You have children. That is your inspiration. It could be anything. It could be, you're at a basketball game, whatever. There's so many different things that you can draw from just being around people as general. You know what I mean?
Sorry, it's Vicky, isn't it, that you're talking about?
Yeah.
I love it. I was listening to her stuff. I love it. I think it's great. I really do. I think it's great. She's really kind of got a great style.
Yeah. She has her own style, and she's growing to her own stuff. And I've watched it, and I'm like, man, it's amazing from how she started and how she's progressed, and now she's just doing her own thing. And for me, that's another inspiration too. You know what I mean? Always being inspired. For me, I feel like it can never get boring. Once things starts to get boring, then that's when you have to go back to the drawing board and figure out maybe something with me. You know what I mean? I will never be those guys like, oh, this is not my thing, and I don't like this music. It's like, it's different. It may not be my thing that I listen to every day, but you still got to know, still got to be in tune with what's happening, or else you just become an old grumpy guy that talking about, in my day I used to do this, and it's like, your day was yesterday. We got to, life continues, life move forward.
That's really true. Actually, that's really true.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about drawing boards, if those times when you've been working on something and then you get to the stage where you think this isn't working, going back to the drawing board. I mean, how does that, kind of like, how does that make you feel, and how do you kind of handle those sort of situations?
For me, once again, it's like not pushing it too much. Like, if your mind and your body is just like, this is not it today, leave it alone.
Yeah.
Come back to it, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, because if you come back to it maybe like a week or 2 weeks later, now you forget about it, and then now you're coming back to a fresh new start, and then you go back to that idea that you was working on, and now you have a new inspiration because it's a different day. You're in a different
Yeah.
mindset. Maybe at that particular time, maybe you were tired, or maybe nothing just wasn't coming out. So getting it back to the drawing board is just kind of like reset, refresh, go watch a movie, do other stuff that's not particularly to what it is that you're trying to do, and then come back with a reset and a fresh mind. And then I feel like that's what I do. Sometimes when I have something in my head that I want to get out, but it's not really coming out the way that I want. I'll just say, you know what, I'll come back to it and let me just do something else. Go cook. I don't know. Just do whatever it is that naturally that you're
Yeah.
not thinking about it. And then
Yeah.
once naturally you're not thinking about it, then you come back to it, and then now you have a complete different mindset than what it was the first time. So that's what I do as far as like when things are not really going the way that I want to go to, or sometimes too you can do the old fashioned way and get a drawing board and write out. Everybody's different. Somebody
Everybody's
may say,
different.
okay, maybe I have a deadline. Maybe you're a type of person that you got to have deadlines to make sure. So you put, okay, this deadline, I need to have this. If you don't get this done today, okay, just make sure that you keep that deadline. But for me, it's just kind of like, doesn't matter if something has to be due tomorrow. Maybe today I ain't feeling it, but maybe if I go and take a nap and I come back fresh at 8 o'clock, then I'll be up the whole night, and now I can work on it and turn it in that next day.
It's interesting actually. That, like, if I think about myself,
Mm,
when before I started this podcast, which was just over
mm,
2 years ago, so it
mm.
was around about February 21 when I
Okay.
started it,
Mm,
and I knew the sort of subjects that I was interested in, the sort of stuff that we've been talking
mhm.
about. I was really interested in that. I've been interested in the future and kind of what
Yeah,
it looks like, all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
I didn't know what to do with it, and I was talking to Saskia, my partner, and she came up. She said, "Why don't you do podcast?" And
Mm,
I would just by just like having a conversation, I would never have done it. Just like a random kind of thing. Because
yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
you just think, okay, where's my inspiration going to come from? I
Right,
don't know.
right, right, right.
And just having that conversation with her, she said, "Why don't you start a podcast?" And I mean, to be fair, I mean, it had to be dragged into this. I was like,
Right, right,
nobody's
right, right.
nobody's going to
Exactly.
want nobody's going to want to listen to me. Nobody's going to say yes and all that kind of stuff. And here
Right.
we
It's
are.
like yeah, here we are. Look, 2 years later. You know what I mean? And you're doing it, you
Yeah.
know?
And
So
I had to kind of fight this whole kind of self belief.
mhm.
Like I just said, well, nobody's gonna come on this, nobody's gonna do it, And I was basically it was fear. It was like
Right,
I was
right.
making every excuse why not to do it.
Right, exactly. See, but even like with the podcast, like you know how sometimes when that record button is on and people start freezing up, and then it's just like, what am I going to say? It's just like having a conversation. Just think of it,
Yeah,
the record button
yeah,
is not there, and just talk, because
yeah,
me and my sister, once again, we have like a little podcast too. And it's like, I would never thought in a million years that we'd be doing like a
mm,
radio show and talking to people. And sometimes we
yeah,
would have them come up and they'll talk and they'd be like, well, I don't, what are you going to ask me? And I'm like, there is no questions. Let's just talk. Let's just
just
have a
talk.
conversation. And
Yeah,
then within 5 minutes, you can't even get them off the
yeah.
mic. They're just rambling and going, going. Yeah, yeah.
And do
You
you know?
know.
Do you know what? I don't know if you found this as well. But I mean, I'm sure you have. But I found the probably like the hardest thing, but the best thing you can do is just listen to somebody. You just
Hmm.
and just what they're saying, and listen and think about what they're saying, because there's so much in there to, like you say, to have those kind of conversations. It sounds simple and
Absolutely.
like, oh, well, of course, yeah, but listening is sometimes the hardest thing to do, and sometimes we don't do it.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. No, definitely for sure. For sure. But yeah, man. No, like I said, for me, it's just follow your instinct. I always felt that even at a younger age, is just you know your first instinct is never fails you. you know, because it's always people comes back to, oh man, I should have listened to the first time when I said, because pretty much your first instinct with your gut feeling is probably the right answer. You know what
probably
I mean?
the right
And
answer.
but like I said, it's just going through life. Like we don't have the answers, but I just know that I just want to better myself at doing what it is that you love to do. Like same thing like with you. You said the podcast. Like it took a period of time to get comfortable to actually, and look where you're at. Look how much time has went by and killing it. You know what I mean? Now 2 years later, you know what I mean? But 2 years earlier, you might have been like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this. And who am I going to interview? And how am I going to? It's just do it. Just do it. And if it happens, that one person, one listener can turn into 1 million listeners. The thing is being consistent, and you have an end goal, but just being consistent. And that's what I've always like try to do is just you set a goal, but just be consistent, because it's going to build. The more you do it, the more people will listen, the more will come. And that's all it is. And it's the same thing with music. Like there could be 3 million people releasing music today, but then you have to find your path and your niche of what makes you different from those 3 million people, and just do what you do best. You know what I mean? And make sure that your circle is close, and don't have too many people feeding into the vision that you're trying to get to. You know what I mean? And my thing is that anybody that's around you, they need to understand the vision and the process that where you're trying to go, not just being there just to hang out. You know what I mean? And you want to receive all the fruits and labor of your success, where you should, if everybody plays a role in this stuff. So, that's why I said, like, when they see concerts and you see some of your favorite artists, they're like, wow, this is great. But they don't know how much it takes to get up on that stage, and the behind the scenes stuff, and songs, and the rehearsal, and the lights. And, there's been times where I've did a show and like 2 of my strings pop on stage, and I only have 1 guitar. Now in that present moment, there's like 10,000 people. In that present moment, do I stop and panic, and then everybody's looking at me like, okay, what's up with this guy? Or do I play through it and figure out a way how to maneuver? You know what I mean? So those are all tested. You know what I mean? And, I had to play with 4 strings one time, but I made it through. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Life's little tests. Yeah.
Exactly. And you never know when is it going to come. You could have everything all lined up, and then something will come and try to throw it off. So that's why I'm like, just instead of like panicking at the first thing that happens, just be like, hey, take it as it comes, and take a breather and maneuver and find the best way how to get through it, because we don't have the answers. None of us doesn't have the answers, but by going through stuff, that's how you will find answers to whatever it is you want to do.
Marcus, that is inspirational.
Oh, thank you, man.
Thanks so much, man. Thanks so much. It's been
thank you so
amazing.
Much, man. Thank you for having
amazing
me.
talking.
Thank you
really
for having me. Likewise, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the show, and I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you'll tune in for the next episode. In the meantime, it would be really awesome if you could rate and review the show, and also share it with any friends who you think might enjoy it.